Chapter 17. She ducked into the washroom under the guise of tying back her hair. Her heart was dancing as she combed back the long locks and knotted a ribbon at the nape of her neck. She didn't know what she was thinking. Perhaps she'd gone raving mad. She shoved the doubts aside. She couldn't change her mind now. Or rather, she could, but she knew that she wouldn't. It was only for one night. She would do this once, to see, to experience, to make her own choice. She pinched her cheeks, dabbed rose water on her wrists, and was at the window again before her nerves could overtake her. Geste was still in the tree boughs, playing with his deck of cards. Raven was cleaning his feathers. Noticing her, Geste perked up and slid the cards back into some secret pocket. "Are you ready?" he asked, his whole face lightening up in a way that filled her with warmth and sugar. "I'm not sure this is a good idea." "It's because it's most likely a very bad idea." With one easy movement, he stepped across to her windowsill and hopped down into her bedroom. A certain amount of shock skithered down her spine. There was a man in her bedroom, unchaperoned, unsupervised. In secret, she said nothing of this nature, only took half a step away from him. Her heel brushed against the white rose she dropped. Geste took off his hat and turned it upside down. "This is going to work," he said, reaching into the hat, "but it's going to require a certain amount of faith." He pulled his hand out, revealing a black lace parasol with an ivory handle. He popped it open above their heads. "What are we doing with that?" "You'll see." He set the hat back on his head, stepped back onto the windowsill, and held his free hand toward her. After a count of 3, during which she determined that she had lost her wits, Kath placed her hand into his and allowed him to pull her up beside him. "You're not going to scream, are you?" She didn't bother trying to hide her terror when she met his gaze. Frowning, Geste ducked his face closer and released her hand so he could instead grasp her elbow. "You're not going to faint, are you?" She shook her head, though it had no confidence behind it. She risked a glance at the ground, 2 stories below. "Lady Pinkerton," he said warningly. She looked up again and moved her trembling hands toward his tunic. "I wonder it would be terribly inappropriate for me to hold on to you." "I think it better anyway." She nodded once and wrapped her arms around his shoulders, burying her face into his chest. She clutched him as one might a boy in the sea. Geste stiffened and wrapped his free arm around her waist. There was a moment of suspension around them. She could feel his heart beating near to hers, and his breath in her hair. Something about him seemed crafted for her, and that thought made her face flame, like she was standing too close to a fire. "All right then," he said, and she wondered whether it was her imagination that made him seem suddenly nervous. "No screaming." She pressed her lips together. She took a step off the windowsill, pulling her along with him. A scream clawed up her throat, but was captured and muffled against her clenched teeth. There was a sudden swoop, her stomach flipping inside her, and a drop, but a gradual one. Shaking, she peeled her eyes open. She turned her head so she could see beyond Geste's shoulder to the brick and window trim of her house as they drifted to the ground. It was over too soon. They hit the ground easily. She could not release him until her legs regained their strength, but he didn't complain. His grip didn't loosen until hers did, but but he also didn't try to keep her once she pulled away. As Catherine gasped up toward her bedroom window, glowing with firelight, Jess returned the parasol to his hat.
"How will I get back?"
"Don't worry," he said, sliding a gloved hand into hers, in a way that seemed almost more intimate than their recent embrace. She didn't pull away, although she knew she should. "I have a trick for that too, Lady Catherine."
"In your hat?"
He chuckled. "My hat isn't the only magical thing about me." She smirked, feeling bolder outside the confines of her home.
"I'm well aware," she said. "Impossible is your specialty."
His face brightened with that true smile again. He whistled, and she heard the flap of birds' wings overhead. Raven appeared from the shadows and perched on Jess' shoulder as he tugged Catherine toward the road. "Where is the nearest crossroads?" he asked.
"Under the little bridge over the creek."
Once they stepped off the lawn, Jess released her hand, and Kath attempted to hide her disappointment, even from herself. He did, however, offer his elbow, which she accepted, folding her fingers around his arm, and surprised to find more muscle there than his lithe frame would suggest. It was a short walk to the bridge that crossed over Squeaky Creek, where a set of steps branched off the road and led down to the embankment. Kath took the lead, guiding them to the shore and pointing at a green-painted door that was built into the bridge's foundation. Jess tipped his hat and held the door for her. The crossroads was an intersection that connected all corners of the kingdom, a long, low hall lined with doors and archways, windows and stairwells. The floor was made of black and white checkerboard tiles, and the walls jutted off in every direction. The shape was constantly shifting. Some of the walls were made of dirt, with tree roots growing through them. Others were covered in fine gilt wallpaper. Still others were made of glass, and water would be seen pressing on them from the other side, like a fishbowl. Jess led Kath to a hollow tree trunk with an opening that looked like it had been cut out by a hatchet. He took her hand again and pulled her through. On the other side, Kath found herself on a dirt pathway that was succumbing to moss. Trees towered overhead, and through the close-ground trunks, Kath saw a spot of golden light. This was the direction Jess headed, picking his way along the shadowed path. The forest opened into a meadow, and the source of the light was revealed. A small traveling shop. It had a canvas roof and rickety wagon wheels and a hitch on the front that no longer had any horses or mules attached to pull it. A round door was on the back of the shop with a sign above it that read, in flourishing gold script, "Hatta's Marvelous Millinery. Fine hats and headdresses for distinguished ladies and gentlemen." Kath tilted her head to one side, brow furrowing.
"We're going to a hat shop?"
"The finest hat shop," Jess corrected. "And I assure you, the hatter throws the maddest tea parties this side of the looking glass." He paused. "Probably on either side of the looking glass. Now I think about it." Anxiety was fast seeping into Kath's thoughts. She started to laugh, questioning how she'd come to be here.
"I'm not sure I want to go to a mad tea party."
Jess winked at her. "Trust me, my lady, you do." Stepping up to the back of the shop, he pulled open the door.